Welcome! How can I help you today? Hi, we're looking for the bakery. Of course, right this way. We have fresh bread today.
Great, thank you.
Is this something you still need training for, or is it simply beyond the scope of what this job requires? I'm sorry, madam. I'll get this sorted.
Is this something you still need training for? Or is it simply beyond the scope of what this job requires? 12 words, spoken quietly. And in less than a day, they would collide with a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for 11 years. Most people believe they can recognize importance the moment it walks into a room. The tailored suit, the waiting car outside, the voice that expects to be obeyed before it's finished speaking. But life has a habit of proving us wrong. Sometimes, the most extraordinary person in the building is the one everyone already decided wasn't worth noticing. This is the story of a supermarket cashier who spent more than a decade smiling at strangers who rarely looked back. A rushed executive who believed efficiency was the only currency that mattered. And a 20-second exchange in aisle 7 that neither woman would ever forget. Because the strongest people rarely prove others wrong by raising their voices. They do it by quietly revealing who they've been all along. 6:45. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 11 years, Miriam Hopkins unlocked the staff entrance before the rest of the city had finished waking up. Not because anyone expected it, because she believed excellence began long before anyone was watching. She walked every aisle in silence, straightened cereal boxes that had shifted overnight, adjusted price labels no customer would ever notice, removed bruised fruit before a single complaint could form, wiped fingerprints from freezer doors until the glass caught the ceiling lights again. None of it was in her job description. None of it earned recognition. She did it anyway, with the same care she'd shown on her very first day. Character isn't revealed when someone is watching. It's revealed by what we continue doing when no one is. That belief had been planted years earlier, behind a small fabric stall in Accra, by a mother who never let hardship touch her posture. Never let another person's blindness convince you your light has disappeared, she used to say. The words followed Miriam across an ocean, through boardrooms, into a supermarket apron. Inside these walls, none of that mattered. Here, she was simply Miriam, the cashier who remembered birthdays, who stayed behind to help new employees finish their shifts, who carried heavy bags to elderly customers' cars before anyone thought to ask. If a child dropped a chocolate bar, she was already kneeling before the tears started. If someone looked lonely, she found a reason to ask about their day. She never treated kindness as customer service. To her, it was simply part of being human. That morning, dozens of people walked past her. Some smiled. Most didn't really see her at all. Not because she tried to disappear, because familiarity does that to people. The faces we see every week are often the ones we stop noticing altogether.
And perhaps that's one of life's quiet tragedies. The people who give the most often receive the least attention.
Miriam never measured her worth by recognition. She measured it by consistency, by showing up, doing the right thing, leaving every place a little better than she found it. She couldn't have known that, before the day ended, someone would test every one of those values without meaning to. Her name was Victoria Ashworth Bell, and by lunchtime, her path would cross Miriam's in a way neither of them could imagine. Board meetings, investor calls, contract negotiations, a charity luncheon squeezed between 2 strategy sessions. Every minute had a purpose. Every second had a price. For 20 years, Victoria had built her reputation on one principle: efficiency. Faster decisions, faster meetings, faster results. It had carried her from junior analyst to one of London's most respected executives, intelligent, disciplined, exceptionally capable. But somewhere along that climb, something had quietly changed. When every day becomes a race against the clock, it's easy to start measuring people by the time they cost you, instead of the value they bring.
Slow service became incompetence.
Questions became interruptions.
Delays became personal. She hadn't noticed the shift, because it never happened all at once. It happened over years. Urgency slowly replacing patience. Achievement slowly replacing empathy. Until the people who made her life easier had quietly become invisible. Not because she meant to disrespect them. Because familiarity had buried their humanity beneath uniforms and job titles. That morning, a rare 40-minute gap opened in her schedule. Enough time to stop at the Kensington branch of Hargrove and Sons and pick up a few groceries herself. It wasn't something she usually did. But the branch was on her route. Convenience won. Sometimes the smallest decisions carry the biggest consequences. The parking lot was already busy when Victoria arrived. Parents unloading toddlers. Delivery drivers wheeling produce toward the loading bay. An elderly couple crossing slowly, as though they had nowhere more important to be. 38 minutes. Plenty of time. She stepped through the automatic doors without noticing the young employee who held them open for her. He offered a cheerful greeting. She gave a distracted nod, eyes already on her phone.
She didn't mean to ignore him. She simply never saw the disappointment cross his face.
Small moments, almost forgettable. Yet they quietly shape how someone experiences their whole day. Victoria turned into aisle 7 without slowing down. Olive oil, organic honey, whole grain pasta already ticked off in her head. The trolley occupied part of the walkway. There was more than enough room to pass. For a brief moment, the interruption felt bigger than it was. Miriam stood immediately, offering the same warm smile she gave every customer. She had no idea who stood in front of her, and she treated her exactly as she treated everyone else, with respect. Victoria barely returned the smile. You should be more careful where you leave that. For a moment, the aisle fell silent. Miriam nodded gently and moved the trolley aside without the smallest flicker of defensiveness. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I'll make sure you have plenty of room. Victoria gave a brief nod and walked on. 20 seconds. That's all. No argument, no confrontation. Nothing dramatic. Just two strangers passing each other on an ordinary Tuesday. Yet sometimes our character is revealed most clearly in moments so small, we assume they'll never matter again. Miriam watched her go, then returned every jar to its place, smiled at a little girl waving from the next aisle, and let the morning continue. Neither of them knew they had just written the first page of a story that would ripple far beyond the supermarket. By midday, the quiet rhythm of morning had disappeared. Trolleys rolled through crowded aisles. Fresh bread vanished from the shelves as fast as it arrived. To most people, it was simply another busy Tuesday. To Miriam, it was another chance to serve people well. The same warm greeting for everyone, whether they carried one item or two full trolleys. Victoria's basket reached Miriam's till without either woman recognizing the morning's echo. When people don't expect to see someone twice in one day, memory tends to overlook the familiar. Miriam recognized her instantly, not because she'd replayed the encounter, but because she made it a habit to remember every face at her checkout. Good afternoon. I hope you found everything you were looking for. Yes, thank you. Nothing hinted at what was coming. One by one, items moved through with quiet efficiency. 11 years of practice made her fast. Then the final item, a small jar of organic honey, its barcode torn away in delivery. I'm so sorry. The barcode's been damaged. I'll enter it manually. One moment. Her fingers moved quickly, but even the fastest cashier can't type a code she can't see. Across the counter, Victoria checked her watch. Then the growing queue behind her. Then the register. To anyone else, it would have felt like a brief delay. To a woman whose days were measured in meetings, those few extra minutes stretched much longer. I've been standing here for 4 minutes. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was, if anything, surprisingly calm, and somehow that made it heavier. Around them, the queue went quiet, the way queues do when a conversation turns uncomfortable.
A father distracted his daughter with a packet of biscuits. An elderly woman lowered her eyes to the flowers in her basket. Even the teenager at the next till instinctively slowed down.
I understand, Miriam said gently. Thank you for your patience. I'm almost finished. She meant it. It wasn't a rehearsed line. But before she could enter the final digits, Victoria spoke again.
4 minutes for 12 items at an express checkout.
The silence deepened. Then came the sentence that would linger long after the receipt had printed. Is this something you still need training for? Or is it simply beyond the scope of what this job requires? No one moved. Sometimes disrespect arrives wearing the clothes of a perfectly reasonable question. Sometimes it hides inside polite language, and those moments leave the deepest marks. Miriam didn't answer right away, not because she was offended, but because she wanted to choose the right words. She finished the transaction, her voice exactly as calm as when it began. Thank you for waiting. Your total comes to £47, 62 pence. Nothing more. No sarcasm. No defensiveness. No attempt to win the moment. Victoria tapped her card, took her receipt without reading it, and paused only to add, I'll be leaving a review. Most people in Miriam's position might have argued, or apologized twice over, or tried explaining the barcode. She did none of it. She simply met Victoria's eyes with the same quiet kindness she'd shown from the start. You're absolutely welcome to. Every customer deserves to be heard. No challenge in her voice, no hidden meaning. Only sincerity. And somehow that unsettled Victoria more than an argument ever could. Within seconds, she was gone. The queue slowly exhaled. The father stepped forward. Don't worry. You handled that better than most people would have. Thank you, Miriam said, and scanned his groceries with the very same care she'd given everyone before him, as though nothing unusual had happened. But something had shifted, not in the supermarket, but in the people who witnessed it. They'd just watched two very different ideas of success collide. One measured by efficiency, one measured by dignity. Neither woman realized it yet, but only one of those definitions would still be standing by morning. By the time the evening sun sank behind Kensington's rooftops, the store had returned to its familiar rhythm. Shelves restocked, queues shorter, soft music drifting through the speakers. To most customers, the day had already been forgotten. Almost everyone. Branch manager Derek Fairmount was finishing his paperwork when a notification chimed. Customer feedback received. 22 years of managing supermarkets had taught him that success wasn't measured by dramatic victories. It was measured by catching small problems before they became large ones. He expected the usual pattern: stock issues, long queues, pricing mistakes. Instead, he found an account of the turnoon at checkout 3. Victoria praised the store's cleanliness, then criticized what she called declining standards of customer service. A cashier who delayed the queue and, in her words, responded without sufficient professionalism. He read it once, then again. Something didn't sit right. Not because customers couldn't be right, but because this didn't match what he'd seen himself, walking past toward the bakery earlier that day. From where he stood, Miriam had been calm, patient, exactly as she always was.
Every story has two versions. Sometimes the truth lives somewhere between them.
Rather than assume, he did what good leaders do. He picked up the phone. Could you ask Miriam to stop by my office before she leaves? No urgency, no accusation, just a simple request. You wanted to see me? Thank you for staying a few extra minutes. He gestured to the chair opposite. We've received some feedback about this afternoon. I want you to know this isn't a disciplinary meeting. I just want to understand what happened. Miriam read it quietly, then nodded almost imperceptibly. She waited longer than she expected. I can understand why she felt frustrated. That's all you have to say? A faint smile. People often remember how they felt more clearly than what actually happened. If she left feeling unheard, then I still have something to learn from the experience.
Derek had expected explanations. Maybe quiet disappointment. Instead, he got humility. Not the kind that pretends fault where none exists, but the kind that refuses to let pride interrupt growth.
Then Miriam's eyes drifted to a stack of maintenance reports beside his keyboard. Derek, has the refrigeration unit in aisle 6 started cycling again? The room went still. How did you know about that? Because if it's the same fault I noticed last month, you're about 3 weeks from replacing an entire compressor, when all you really need is a new thermostat sensor. For the first time in 11 years, Derek looked at Miriam, not as one of his employees, but as someone he realized he'd never truly known. How did you know? I noticed the compressor running longer than usual during my morning walk. The sound changed about 3 weeks ago, she continued, almost casually. If the contractor follows the usual procedure, they'll recommend replacing the entire cooling system. That's exactly what they've proposed. It isn't necessary. The compressor's healthy. The thermostat's sending inconsistent readings. Replace the sensor, calibrate the board, and you'll save the company close to £70,000. Derek opened the file on his desk. Full compressor replacement. Estimated cost just under £70,000. How could you possibly know that? Miriam glanced toward a set of renovation drawings on the corner of the desk. May I? Derek nodded, too curious to interrupt. If you move the bakery here, she traced the outline, and relocate seasonal produce closer to the entrance, customers will naturally slow their pace. That usually increases impulse purchases by 7 to 9%, particularly on weekends. Derek had attended executive retail seminars covering exactly this subject. They'd cost thousands of pounds. Yet the woman beside him spoke about customer flow as comfortably as someone describing the route home. You've studied retail psychology? She laughed softly, not proudly, almost nostalgically. I've spent many years studying people. Retail simply gave me somewhere to observe them. Question after question followed, and each answer quietly dismantled another certainty. Why flowers sell better near the bakery? Why the queue barriers changed last winter? How she'd known the Manchester refurbishment would run over budget before anyone else did because the supplier had already delayed 3 similar projects, and the warning signs were there for anyone who looked closely enough. Derek leaned back. He wasn't speaking to a cashier anymore. The question was who exactly had he been speaking to for the last 11 years? His eyes drifted to a framed photograph on the wall. A company award ceremony, regional directors and senior executives. One face in the back row, half hidden, caught his attention. A familiar smile. He stood and walked closer. Were you? Have we met before? Outside this store? Yes, Miriam said gently. Many times. Derek frowned. Why don't I remember? Because people usually see what they expect to see, not what's actually in front of them. Those words lingered. He replayed every ordinary conversation they'd ever shared, every morning greeting, every staff meeting, and realized he'd never once wondered why she seemed to understand the business better than almost anyone else. He'd simply accepted it, because once we place someone inside a category, our minds often stop looking beyond it. Cashier, cleaner, driver, receptionist. The label becomes the whole story, even when it isn't. He turned back to his desk. One folder remained, stamped confidential. The company logo in the corner. Below it, a name he'd seen 100 times, suddenly reading very differently. Hopkins Holdings. He looked up at Miriam, then down at the folder, then up again. Mrs. Hopkins, who are you? Miriam met his gaze, not with triumph, not with secrecy. Only the same gentle smile she'd offered every customer who ever walked through those doors. Do you know what I enjoy most about this place? She asked softly. Watching people help each other when they think no one important is watching. That's when you discover a company's real culture. Not during inspections, not during meetings. On an ordinary Tuesday, when everyone believes their actions will go unnoticed. From the top shelf of his bookcase, she lifted a worn leather folder and set it on his desk. Inside, photographs. A younger Miriam in a supermarket apron, unloading delivery trucks before sunrise, sitting with new employees during their first week, Christmas parties, staff birthdays, retirement celebrations, more than a decade of ordinary moments, and in every single one, she stood among the staff, never in front, never apart, always beside them. Why spend 11 years working here? Derek asked. When you clearly know more about this company than anyone I've ever met, why not simply lead it from headquarters? Because spreadsheets don't tell you how a frightened new employee feels on their first day. Profit margins don't tell you which manager stays behind after their shift ends to help someone finish theirs. Those things can only be learned by standing where they stand. He opened the confidential folder. Across the first page, the board of directors. His eyes moved down the list and stopped. Chairwoman, Miriam Hopkins. He stood so quickly his chair slid back. Mrs. Hopkins, you're one. Yes, she said, the smallest nod. I'm the majority shareholder, and for the past 11 years, I've chosen to spend 2 days a week working in our stores. Silence. Not the silence of confusion. The profound silence. that follows the collapse of a deeply held assumption. Please don't apologize, Miriam said gently. You've treated me with kindness from the beginning. That's exactly why I stayed. If people had treated me differently because of my title, I would never have learned the truth. Titles change behavior. Character reveals it. That sentence would remain with Derek for the rest of his career. A position can command respect. Only humility earns trust. And trust was the foundation on which Miriam had quietly built an entire company. The following morning, Victoria felt the quiet satisfaction of a task completed. Her review had been submitted the night before. One not out of anger, she told herself, but responsibility. She described the delay, questioned the service, suggested improvements, and expected the usual reply, an automated email, a polite apology, maybe a discount voucher. But extraordinary stories rarely announce themselves in advance. They begin disguised as ordinary days. Her phone vibrated through a meeting, then again. When it finally ended, she checked the screen. One new email. Regarding your recent visit to Hargrove and Sons. Dear Mrs. Ashworth Bell, thank you for sharing your experience. Rather than responding by email, I'd be grateful for the opportunity to meet you personally. If your schedule allows, I'd like to invite you for coffee at our Kensington branch tomorrow morning. Kind regards, Miriam Hopkins. The name felt vaguely familiar, not from the supermarket, but from somewhere important she couldn't quite place. Her assistant walked in. Do you know who Miriam Hopkins is? Victoria turned the screen toward her. Her assistant's expression changed instantly. The Miriam Hopkins? Chairwoman of Hopkins Holdings. They own Hargrove and Sons, one of the largest retail groups in the country. The corridor felt suddenly very quiet. Why would the chairwoman of a billion-pound company respond personally to a complaint about a cashier? Unless, the thought arrived so suddenly she nearly dismissed it. No, that couldn't be true. Could it? That evening, curiosity refused to let her rest. She searched the name, charity events, leadership awards, business profiles describing one of Britain's most respected retail entrepreneurs. She clicked the first photograph. Her breathing slowed. The same gentle smile, the same calm eyes, the same woman who had apologized for a damaged barcode, the same woman she had questioned only 24 hours earlier. Article after article confirmed it. Miriam Hopkins hadn't simply been employed by the company. She'd built much of it, expanded it, led it, for more than 2 decades. Embarrassment washed over Victoria, not because she'd criticized someone powerful, but because she'd criticized another human being without offering the understanding she would have expected for herself.
Respect shouldn't depend on discovering someone's title. It should exist long before we know it. Sleep came slowly.
She replayed the exchange again and again. The damaged barcode, the quiet apology, the sentence she wished she could take back. It sounded sharper now, heavier. She imagined hearing it from the other side of the till. Then a harder thought arrived. If Miriam had never revealed who she was, would Victoria have reflected on her behavior at all, or simply kept believing she'd been right? Some questions arrived too late to change the past, but they arrived just in time to change the future. The next morning, Victoria walked into Hopkins Holdings expecting ceremony, a security escort, an executive reception. Instead, a receptionist greeted her warmly. Mrs. Hopkins is expecting you, and simply led the way. Walking through the familiar aisles, she noticed something she'd completely overlooked before. Employees greeted each other by name. Managers paused to help staff, instead of merely supervising them. No one looked hurried into silence. The atmosphere felt different, not because the company had more resources than others, but because kindness seemed woven into its culture. And cultures always reflect the character of the people who build them. The office itself surprised her. No marble, no oversized portraits, no walls of awards, just sunlight, shelves lined with books and small plants, and a kettle whispering in the corner. A room confident enough to have nothing to prove. Miriam looked up from the coffee tray and smiled. The same warmth from the checkout, only now a simple navy blazer had replaced the apron. Even as chairwoman of one of Britain's largest retail groups, she looked remarkably unchanged. Good morning, Mrs. Ashworth Bell. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, and for seeing me personally. Please, have a seat. Rather than sitting behind her desk, Miriam carried both cups to a small round table by the window. Two identical chairs, no barrier between them. Leadership, she believed, wasn't strengthened by creating distance. It was strengthened by removing it. Victoria wrapped both hands around the warm cup. She'd rehearsed an apology all morning. Now every sentence had disappeared.
I owe you an apology. I spoke to you unfairly. I made assumptions about you 6. No, I made assumptions about your job. And because of that, I forgot to see the person standing in front of me. Miriam let the silence hold, giving honesty room to breathe. Then she smiled gently.
Thank you. Just 2 words. No lecture, no reminder of titles. Only gratitude. You're not angry? No. Disappointed 6 for a moment. Not because of what you said to me, but because I wondered how many other people hear those same words without ever getting the chance to sit where you're sitting now. Victoria lowered her eyes, thinking not of herself now but of every cashier, every cleaner, every driver whose name she'd rarely learned. 6 people who had quietly helped her every day without asking for recognition. How many conversations had she rushed through? How many people had she unknowingly made feel invisible? Miriam slid a thin folder across the table 6 pages from the company's employee well-being survey. One figure highlighted, 68%. Every 3 months, I read every response myself. She tapped the number. 68% of our customer-facing colleagues say they've been spoken to in a way that made them feel less than human. 6, at least once during an average shift. Victoria read it again. It stopped being a statistic and became people. 6, someone's daughter, someone working late to pay university fees, someone saving for a first home. When someone leaves work believing they matter less, Miriam said, they don't leave that feeling at the checkout. They carry it home. 6, to their children, their partners, their parents. Words travel much farther than we imagine. An unexpected tightness rose in Victoria's throat. She'd attended countless leadership seminars, read the best-selling books, delivered speeches on corporate culture. Yet here, over 2 simple cups of coffee, she was learning one of the most important lessons of her life. Not from a professor, but from a woman who'd chosen to spend 11 years behind a supermarket till. Why? She finally asked. Why spend 11 years where nobody knew who you really were? Miriam looked toward the checkout lanes below. Because if I ever became too important to stand where my employees stand, I'd become too distant to lead them well. No pride in her voice, only conviction. The kind that comes from living a belief, not simply talking about it. And in that moment, Victoria understood something no business school had taught her. Leadership isn't demonstrated by the office you occupy. It's revealed by the people you choose to stand beside. Victoria left carrying nothing but her handbag, yet somehow felt entrusted with something far heavier than a business strategy, a different way of seeing people. Because the world rarely changes overnight, our perspective does. Walking back through the store, she noticed what she'd never truly seen before. A young employee patiently helping an elderly man reach a packet of tea. A cleaner steering carefully around a toddler, fascinated by his own reflection in the polished floor. A bakery assistant wrapping fresh bread with the care of a gift. Yesterday, they'd been background characters in the story of her day. Today, they were people, with families, dreams, invisible struggles she knew nothing about. Near the fruit section, a teenage employee struggled to lift a crate of oranges onto a display. Without thinking, Victoria set down her basket. "May I give you a hand?" Together, they lifted it into place. 30 seconds, no audience, no applause. Sometimes the biggest changes reveal themselves through the smallest decisions. Further along, another customer spoke impatiently to a cashier whose payment terminal had frozen. Victoria recognized the expression. She'd worn it herself days earlier. For a moment, she considered walking away. Then she remembered. Words travel much farther than we imagine. She waited instead. When the transaction finally cleared, she caught the young cashier's eye. "You handled that beautifully." The smile that followed wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Sometimes encouragement restores more than confidence. Sometimes it restores dignity. That afternoon, Victoria opened her laptop and read her own review one final time. The words hadn't changed. She had. Without hesitation, she deleted it and began writing again. Not about delays, not about damaged barcodes. This time about patience, professionalism, and a company whose greatest strength wasn't efficiency, but humanity. The greatest measure of customer service isn't how quickly someone scans your shopping. It's how consistently they treat every person with dignity. She clicked submit, not to repair her reputation, but because it was true. Days later, Derek read the updated review aloud in the staff room. Some employees smiled. Others exchanged thoughtful glances. A young cashier turned to Miriam. "Did you know she was going to do that?" "No," Miriam said softly. "People change when they choose to, not when they're forced to." No triumph in her voice, only gratitude. Because genuine change is never about winning an argument. It's about opening a heart. That afternoon, Miriam returned to checkout 3. The same register, the same greeting, the same warmth for every customer who passed through. Cheerful or distracted, or hardly speaking at all. Nothing about her routine changed after the revelation. She hadn't worked behind that till to make a point. She worked there because she believed service was never beneath a leader. It was the very thing that made leadership meaningful. Across the store, Victoria paused for one final glance before leaving. Their eyes met briefly. No words needed. Some apologies are spoken. Others are lived. Miriam gave a small nod. Victoria returned it with a grateful smile, then walked through the automatic doors, not as the woman who'd entered days before, but as someone quietly becoming the person she hoped to be. There's an old saying, character is revealed by how we treat people who can do nothing for us. It's a beautiful thought, but perhaps it isn't entirely accurate, because every person we meet can offer us something, a lesson, a perspective, a reminder of our own humanity. The only question is whether we're willing to see it. Miriam Hopkins never needed to prove she was successful. Her title could have done that. Her company could have done that. Instead, she chose something far more difficult, to stay close enough to ordinary people that she never forgot what extraordinary leadership actually looked like. Victoria Ashworth Bell believed she'd walked into a supermarket to buy groceries. In reality, she walked into a lesson no university, no boardroom, and no leadership seminar could ever have taught. Respect should never depend on discovering someone's importance, because by the time we discover it, we've already revealed our own. Perhaps that's why the quietest people often leave the deepest impressions. They don't demand admiration. They simply live in a way that inspires it. So the next time you stand in a queue, pass a cleaner in a hallway, thank a delivery driver, or greet the person serving you across a counter, pause long enough to remember what this story quietly revealed. Every uniform hides a life. Every smile carries a story. Every ordinary person deserves extraordinary respect, because we never truly know who someone is. But every single day, we show the world exactly who we are. Thank you for spending these moments with us. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs the reminder that kindness is never wasted. And before you go, tell us in the comments, what's one act of unexpected kindness you'll never forget? Your story might become the encouragement someone else needs today. If you enjoy cinematic stories that reveal life's quiet truths, subscribe to the Unspoken chapter. Every week, we bring you stories that remind us the greatest lessons are rarely shouted. They are simply lived. Until next time, take care of the people the world too often overlooks, because sometimes the most important person in the room is the one no one thinks to notice. I'll see you on the next chapter.